Okay. So let's take our seats. And for the next talk, I will like to welcome David Pech, and he will talk about how they built an AI incident responder again, which I'm kind of interested how it goes. And you may be mistaken about this dual presentation, and he will just do it single-handedly. And as always, you can scan the QR code for Slido and you can post your questions and they will be answered in the end. So the stage is yours.
Thank you. So, hello, and I definitely welcome you for some interesting session on the AI agents that's gonna, of course, replace us. So, my name is David, and I'm still being employed and still like not being overrun by agents. But it's I'm so glad that I see so many people that might be unemployed in a few years because of the phenomena. So, just maybe quick look back at the KubeCon. Not just the previous one, but many of those. Basically, every other booth is telling you something like, hey, this is my agent that will take away your work and do something for you. More, closer. Pardon. Okay, so technical difficulties, sorry about those. So the pitch is very simple, right? You plug in the agent to your infrastructure, of course, to your production. When there is an incoming alert, the agent will wake up. It won't wake you up. It will do some magical fix, and then your production is safe and sound, and of course, you can uninterruptedly sleep for the rest of the night. But the reality probably is not like this. So first of all, I think that we won't be hearing about many of those companies with these offers like next year or the year after it. We are really in an explosion of these tools. Everybody would like to have a bite of those. Definitely some of those won't survive. The vendors, I think, currently are not very, let's say, skilled with some read-write experience. So they can showcase the most perfectly, but are you really willing to let them into your production, like with some safeguards, etc.? So first thing that there is, I think that we should be much more realistic what we can expect from the agent. Not that it will like solve all problems, but let's say that it would just help us on the investigation part and like lower the time after we wake up. How much time do we need to pick up what's really going on and maybe pinpoint the exact problem. So here maybe there is some much more realistic pitch what it can help you with. It is still very valuable, but you are not letting write the agent to your production. So basically, this is again the demo, and the problems it silently like assumes. So first of all, the agent like knows the same things you do, right? It knows where to look inside of your GitOps repositories, which file to change, how they are layered, and sometimes they are taken by some other tools. So they are not of like all of those are very primitive to understand. For example, they have of course right credentials. We trust them to do their job, right, in the full extent of what we want them to do. And in this example, for example, we have something like out-of-memory kill, which is very easy to understand. And the agent, in my case, try to enhance the memory 25% up. Does it make sense? 25%, I mean? Should it look maybe and investigate from the metrics how the application can behave? Maybe I am running some Java application and it has some different definition what the application within the container can take. Is it reasonable? Etc., etc., etc. So it's definitely like not easy. So let's take a few steps back and let's really think how you should approach SRE, incident agents, anything in this direction. This is our approach. So we said, okay, we need to buy the product, of course. How do we do it? This is what we know, right? We are engineers. But who is it for? And honestly, we don't know. I mean, obviously, we would like the ops people to get some help. But DevOps people as well? Should we also like help the developers and in shifting left? Maybe. And what it should do? Again, it's funny, but we don't know. Because we've seen some wonderful examples what it can do, but is it like viable in our infrastructure to do the merge request for increased memory, or should we let it just investigate? We really don't we don't know what we want. We are not buying a car and we know like how to run a car, what it can do, right? For the SRE agent is very different. So Technicals, I will basically skip those. We have wipe coded some Python, let's say, basement on Claude Agent SDK. Some of us are Entropic fans, let's say. We've tapped it to our Slack to talk with it through Slack, and we also bundled a lot of repositories. The most important part is the last one, that we have some workflow, because the thing is that what did typically some companies, some vendors are approaching you, hey, we have a wonderful tool that will do this. You buy the tool, and now you have a context problem, because what the tool really should do, what your company specifically would like it to do, where you do allow it to do anything. So just to explain, our product, or like our tool technically, could sell bread over Slack, with a different context. Why not? And it can be very easily replaced. This is the major takeaway. So what we have is not that important in comparison to this context and integrations and like the way how we treat it. I have a lot of screenshots from some real scenarios that we have. So imagine that you have a pager duty, so there an alert comes in and it has some structure. So it has some attributes, which environment it was, etc. PagerDuty, by default, has an SRE agent which can do the analysis. And if you look at it, based on those attributes, it assumes a ton of things. And I need to admit, it's not bad, given that it doesn't have access to our Git repositories, for example. Is it usable? Absolutely not, because there are so many problems. Just with this particular slide, it doesn't know how do we install, for example, Cerium, where should we really get the error, etc. So it is able to get you some watery generic pieces of advice. I have a nice experience with the PagerDuty folks, and I'm not definitely trying to shame them, because they have improved the SRE agent a lot over past months. But for example, in November, they said, no, we don't have any plans currently at that point in time for you to add some context to our agents, which is just terrible. You need to have the context that is specific to you, otherwise you will get something like this, the best. So our approach was to try to mimic what we have locally, because we run Claude Code mostly. We run it in some monorepo style, meaning that we have a lot of Git repositories next to each other, and we just try from the root level, hey, do your investigation, use any of these subfolders that you like. They are, of course, very interconnected, and for some feature, you sometimes need to access 5 of those, so it's not easy. So there are several problems with this. First, you need to invest into some init/init in Claude, and then you need to fit it up with some information, how do you do things. In our case, it's the wiki, and of course, as many of you will have the same problem, if you feed it with some legacy out-of-date information, it will take it as a fact and progress from them, which is typically damaging the reasoning it does, the results it has. So we needed basically to start from scratch. Our wiki is something like medium-sized. We also had a discussion how to connect it properly, because originally all the people say, hey, use some fun MCP server that there is for it. But we have found out actually that if we let the agent run autonomously, run it on its own, it is typically much better. So our approach currently is that we prefer to have a lot of exports to Markdown in some structured folder. And we basically let the Claude agent roam through those. We also have on each folder and subfolders the init. So there is something like a roster, what can be found in this folder and how to proceed. And typically we have 30 to 110 tool usages throughout the run, which just explain how the Claude agent works, meaning that it really starts from the root and it tries to read as many information as it feels necessary. This, having it reasoning on its own, was the most effective, as we found, instead of some rack servers and some much more advanced stuff, in fact. Another thing that we were there was a lot of discussion on it, how to approach if we should keep the same session, because in Claude typically you have the same session and you can have multiple chats within the same session, obviously, right? But for the agent and keeping the session somewhere in the Kubernetes cluster non-stop online is not typically a good thing. So first of all, by default at least, our tokens expire in 5 minutes. So if you are not posting another question to the same context, In 5 minutes, you are basically rereading all the tokens, you are spending them again. We were quite afraid to let the agent, with each question it has, basically start a new session. There is, of course, some startup time for the Claude, like, let's say, foundation to run, etc. But the main thing was about the context. And actually, this is quite interesting because we have at least found out that this is not a problem for us. But it also required some tuning, meaning that if you have some conversation, the agent can leave some traces like, okay, I have checked this, or this is a dead end, or so. And if you add this to your context, then the following rank, even though it is from scratch, it can be highly effective, and you are not keeping many sessions, you are not spending too much tokens as an overhead, etc. So Slack context. This is very interesting because you are running an agent, and our original idea was, hey, there is so much things happening to Slack. We have so many channels. People are discussing in like within the outage what's happening, etc. We would like to feed it like these channels and everything, 7 days ago. Sometimes it works, and here you have a very nice example. So it is able to deduce that in some database, there is not just problem in that single particular database, but there are also on the other databases, other replicas, there are some other problems. So it can tell you, okay, you are not having just problem on this single VM, but let's say outside of the box. It's questionable if we would allow it to, of course, take the data from the MCP and see, okay, there are some alerts firing also on these, how it would work. But this is our approach. Funnily enough, we have found that the agent basically is not reading the context we provided with. It is typically doing some grab sets, and it is trying to narrow the context to the smallest, let's say, amount as possible and read just what it feels is relevant. So this approach, even though we still use it, is not very effective. And like agent will try, or maybe in some instructions, like we aim it to be effective, so it is not looking around. Looking around means much more context, much more time spent, and in the end, I would say that from our, at least, practice, it's very questionable if you really want it, unless you were explicitly asked, hey, can you look around, what's happening, what alerts do we have, etc. When you will develop AI agents, you will, of course, discuss sometimes if we should have some subsystem as a context, meaning that we would just have instructions how to do it, or if you would like to code. Sometimes it's very hard to decide. And I have, problem that seemed obvious for me from the first go, and this is how the agents should output to Slack, because I thought, okay, this is obviously a code problem. I will just have some transposition of the output. So either if the agent will have no formatting at all, possibly, or we will have some easy transposition from, I don't know, like XML to the block kit which is used on the Slack. This is easy thing to do, right? But when I started to wipe code it, it's not that easy to do. And actually I found that it's much more effective for you to have instructions, examples, how the agent itself should do it. And then it can do it pretty effectively. Of course, it's spending some tokens on it, but this is very effective. Another problem that we got just outside of it is very funny, basically, because the output gets polluted. And we have discovered that except of the thinking, which we've disabled for the output, there is something like called extended thinking, which is visible as a regular output. So when the agent has started to do the output, first thing, it like internally voiced some opinion it has, what it's going to do. This is the first sentence, and then it started to output. When it gets to the context defining, hey, you should output for Slack, that's where the Jameson comes in. So the way we have solved it is that the first instructions is, hey, you need to check the output mode, and this works 99.9% of the time. Not always, but it works quite well. So you will face very different challenges to your coding skills. We would like to get the results from reasonable time. This is unsolved for us still. I don't know how to solve it properly. Of course, you can choose a different model. If you choose something more thinking like Opus, it will take a longer time, of course. But in general, you cannot force the agent to quit at certain time. You can have it limited by number of steps, and this is the best approach that we currently have. So we are trying to say in the context, hey, you have this amount of time, and please use it wisely. This is how you should use it, like prioritize things that are really important, etc. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not at all. So this is still unsolved. A lot of MCPs you will encounter, especially in these early stages, they are just some like sparkling on top of the API. And what do I mean by it? If you have a MCP-driven architecture, this means that it is very like aligned to natural queries you have, and you query very differently in comparison to the API, right? So in many cases, you will need some translator, let's call it like this, meaning or that you are giving instructions. Hey, for these kinds of use cases, queries, like find host, you actually need to do netbox get object because, and with these parameters because X, Y, Z. So actually we found out that this worked again pretty well, and for each of those MCP servers, we have some instructions that simplify its approach. It is very easy for the MCPs to expose a lot of data, especially like for us as ops people, we have sysadmin everywhere, right? And it's very hard to narrow the data we get from them. So if you would just paste your own token to, for example, PagerDuty in this example, we have, or in return, we get information for all the teams. And given that there is some like non-trivial structure, how can we filter there? It basically resulted in the thing that we needed to have an ID definition. Okay, for our purposes, for this agent, even though you have much wider token, you really need to go just to this ID and filter with these teams, for example, and these conditions. Originally when I started, I thought, okay, Cloud Agent SDK is the same thing like Cloud Code, right? It's just running behind it. And like, this is not true at all, I mean. So you are basically getting some foundation, that is sure, but it has many problems. One that is still unsolved is that the MCPs sometimes fail to start, even though they are network accessible. Some of them run even like in the same namespace, in the same Kubernetes cluster. Like it fails all the time, so we need to retry. Also, the bash is not obvious, right? Because you have something like an allow list, but if you are looking for something fine-grained, you basically need to do this on your own. The title is probably like very stupid at here. There is maybe some new features that might enhance it, but basically our approach at the time is that we are parsing bash ourselves with some library, and we are like trying to guess if this is safe. We are taking just the first command out of possible piping ones, and this is not great. So you need to do a lot of like babysitting yourself in the agent, surprisingly. So I've mentioned a lot of problems, right? And maybe you are not that intrigued to start to work on the agent on your own. But just to give you a hint what can actually work. So first thing, you need to understand how people interact with the agent. And this is, my boss asking it for the first time, what you can't do, and 2 timeouts. Because for some reason, the agent is trying to enumerate all the use cases it cannot do, or I don't know. If you, on the other hand, provide some examples, they are baked in the agents, meaning that you basically, because people will ask, hey, what can you do? They definitely will. So you can help them with some examples. Hey, I'm able to do these kind of things. And by the way, in our context, in our flow, there is some suggestion, hey, let's take 5 examples out of these and just present them. If you would like to look around and you don't understand how Kafka works in this example, so there was a question, can I remove all the Kafka files because I'm running out of disk space? There is a reply. Sorry, I will be skipping a bit through those. You can look up later on because they are maybe like too long. On the right hand, there is a discussion like, hey, can you sum up how our databases in Wrike work? And there would be a wonderful answer for it. Also very interesting, which we like use case which we haven't thought of before, is are we vulnerable to some CV? So you basically take the chunk of the definition of the CV and you throw it in. And given that it has a GitOps repositories behind the scenes, it can tell you very likely for this Nginx vulnerability, you don't use the module at all, you are not vulnerable. Perfect. For some first reconnaissance, wonderful, right? Also, given it has slight history in our scenario, it has history for MCPs for PagerDuty for alerting, etc. It can tell you, is this the first time you are seeing this alert? Were there any historical crashes? How did they look like, etc. It can even do some counting over there. Very interesting fact. Providing links. By the way, this slide probably doesn't look that cool, when I've erased some of the links. Anyway, it can, and one thing that we found out is that the people actually don't want the agent to solve the things, right? but the agent typically is their first contact for some investigation or research. So very useful is that the people from the answer can just click and follow the links and do the investigation or continue investigation themselves or do the fixes themselves. This works very well, and this is really some, let's say, sweet spot of a speed up that the agents can currently offer. Because even though the link, for example, doesn't cover the good parameters, it can still save you a couple of seconds on each click, and this is wonderful. One of the big wins is that we actually have a Victor metrics MCPs connected behind the scenes, and we can again validate. This is, by the way, from the examples file. So you can get information if, for example, the alert is still reasonable, it is still firing. You can get the trends. Are the errors going up and down? And these kind of questions are very easy to ask, and typically you get an easy answer for those without looking at the graphs, or you can even check multiple for some, let's say, more advanced PromQL expressions. Very interesting. It can also run some PromQL expressions or get you the alert definition, so then you know much better the definition of what is actually firing or not. Security, right? A big chapter, also for us. So we have some defense in depth. This is actually some, we are running the agent in the middle. Not all layers are included because we also have some firewalls around it, etc. But basically anything that you would expect is there. So we have some safety prompt, meaning that we have on the system prompt and also on the regular context information like you must not expose secrets, blah, blah, blah. Network policies around the thing, some hardening on the container level. It's inside some Kubernetes cluster that is somehow secured, etc. So sometimes it is working as expected, meaning that when people ask, can you give me the credentials, it is not exposing them. By the way, it even don't have a permission to those, right? Because we don't have a vault MCP or something. And when we, for example, create a context for the agent, we strip all the credentials. Even though they are encrypted, we strip them just to be sure. So it doesn't have that access. This is the first thing. And it behaves very nicely if you ask for them. Wonderful, right? But do we trust it? No, absolutely not. We really need to narrow down all the permissions it has to a bare minimum. And one thing that might be very interesting, on the border of the trusting the agent or not trusting agent, is something like this. So imagine that you are really asking an agent to do some mundane work for you. So we have some alert firing, that some threshold for an alert for some open file descriptors is probably too low. I know that this has been happening multiple times, and I would like an agent to fix it by increasing the threshold. I cannot do it directly because it does not have GitLab access in our case, but it cannot create a merge request for me, but I can let it create a patch, and then I can just copy, paste the patch, and it's done. And once we are more confident with this, maybe, in the future, we will allow it to have GitLab credentials and do the merge request on its own. Maybe, not sure about this. So this is maybe some middle ground that is also useful, and just explaining that you can progress with these tools really based on some experience of yours, and you really don't need to give them access everywhere. Even though will save me 5 minutes of my time opening repo, opening the VS Code, and I don't know what, I can just push it probably with the patch command. The user trust, because we are, as a reminder, we are building a product. So once you lose the user trust, your product is doomed. If you develop, of course, and as I mentioned, there are so many moving parts, so many variables, so many unknown things. Any error that is within the MCP server, as you can see over there for the netbox, that just fails for some reason, or that the people are asking, hey, can you check alerts in Zabbix, which is not connected currently to our server. Any help you are able to give to the people is welcome. So if you, for example, provide information, hey, Zabbix MCP is under security review, and this is why we don't have it, but we will have it soon, come back in 2 weeks. This is much better than, hey, I don't know what Zabbix is. Also, if as you've seen the errors for Slack, for example, previously, this is undermining the user trust, again, unfortunately, quite vividly. How can you get some feedback? Slack reactions actually are perfect. So some of those, bit redirected. There are even some positive ones, you know, at least for the not giving credentials, there were some thumbs up. So it's not always like this, but yeah, many times it's always like this, and you just see the frustration. For some reason, you know, people, when they are frustrated, they are much more likely to give you some reaction in comparison that they are just satisfied and like continue on with their work, right? So let's talk about the real adoption. And this is probably like a very like aligned picture, because you know, you've seen a lot of really cool use cases it can do. It really is kind of for the investigation, it is nailing things. But people don't use it much. And I think that this is, again, coming back to that people don't understand, even though we currently have some opinion what the AI agent should be or should do, people in general, if you ask them, hey, what the AI agent or SRE agent is for, they don't know, in fact. They are not looking actively to use it. And maybe if they have first 1-2 bad prompts that the agent times out, then it does not have access to MCP server X, or it doesn't have access to backend source code because, you know, we don't allow it there, then they stop using it after the first try. So in order to get you really working with AI agents, you really need to dive in, you really need to take it as a product, you need to work with your customers, you really need to do the internal marketing. In our case, for the people to understand what it is, what it can give, what it can get from them, etc. So some takeaways. Of course, no silver bullets, right? Everything that there is just a regular engineering, a mundane work, and it's super boring, right? But you know, maybe there is some silver bullet. So I suggest that instead of doing it like a typical project, maybe you can just wipe code any SRE agent you like. You will become an AI engineer, and you can secure your job, right? Why not? So that's all I had. Thank you. Some questions? Oh, yes, sorry about the blue color. I like it on my laptop, but probably I will need to switch. But no worries, I have another session, so I will, you know, take the feedback and learn from it. Grafana MCP is kind of, I probably shouldn't, you know, publicly say it, but Grafana MCP server doesn't work well. If you know, we also have a proxy from Google that does authentication in front, and we are not allowed to go there directly. So the work I work with Grafana MCP is that I basically port forward SSHing to the host where Grafana lies, and then I'm doing some API. Don't do it, please, but it works very effectively. I'm so surprised, you know, how Claude can work well with the Grafana dashboards, and I am having like 80 different charts on a single dashboard. It works fine. So once you download the JSON, the work is very effectively, but the connection to Grafana is somehow not working well. Kubernetes MCP, if I may address the second part of the question, yes, what you have seen is running inside of Kubernetes cluster. MCPs are running as well there, or more precisely, I think that we are using 4 MCPs for that particular agent. 3 of those are running within the same cluster, and 1 is external. Actually, this is a very interesting topic again, because you know, you can offload the credentials to the MCP, meaning that the agent itself doesn't have tokens, anything. It has unauthorized access to the MCP, and MCP has the authorization on its own. The trust issue is basically giving it a token for GitLab, because you know, it's not just about the creating merge request. It needs to read from GitLab something, right? Probably, you know, I personally have 80 different Git repositories on my machine, and if I would like to work with it effectively, I probably need 20 of those to be accessed by the agent. So I just don't trust it that it won't start creating merge requests. Even for my local setup, it still needs my entry approval to create a merge request, because I have some very bad experiences over these fake merge requests, bad target branches, because we are not always using the master, for example, and the stuff. So this is our problem. Monitoring for the agent. This is a very interesting topic. In our wipe coding Python harness, we basically have some metrics. And these are metrics like how much tokens have you spent. By the way, there are many categories if the tokens are cached or not. So this is not the easy pick just for itself. How many turns you did, how many tools have you used, and things like this. Some latencies, how fast was the response, and you know, to measure the percentiles. But in fact, this is just regular metrics that you would probably expect. The agents don't work in a way that you would expect for a regular like HTTP workload for the web apps, right? So the way they typically work is that you have one request, and it is very hard to understand if the request is going to take 10 seconds or 2 minutes. And if there are coincidentally 2-3 parallel large requests, now you're out of memory. So like tuning the agent is something completely different to the regular application, because you know how spiky it looks from the regular like metrics. Oh, perfect. Syncing monorepo, wonderful question. Thank you very much for this one. So another problem that we have, I didn't like want to put it on slides, but actually, when we deploy the agent, or more precisely, when we compile it into a container, this is the time when we do the git pull. So all the repositories and the information within them, they are valid up to that point. So if the agent would be running 2 days straight, yes, it would have a stale git repositories. The thing is that this doesn't have any, if you don't, of course, want in addition, if you are not letting your agent to access GitLab, this doesn't have like easy solution. So our solution currently is that we on some cron try to redeploy the agent to have fresh gits, but we could also having it git pull on each 10th request, something like this. It wouldn't be as effective. It would spend some time, tokens, etc. But maybe this would be more preferable. Also, the problem is that you are deciding, or you are letting, more precisely, the agent decide based on the status of your Git. We are, for example, using Puppet. Puppet has a typical period of 30 minutes to be applied. So does the Git really like mirror one-to-one exactly what you have in production? No, it does not. There are some discrepancies. So you need to do some trade-offs over here, just to be clear. There will be some stale information. You will need to understand that there is such a thing and how to address it, of course. Sorry, what do you mean by status page probably over here? Not sure if I understand what the status page in this context is. Yeah. I know about this, because we have just changed the workflow for the Rise status page, and there are probably like 3 human approvals to get anything to the status page. So it's completely disconnected right now. Cost limiter. Oh yes, cost limiter. There were rate limiters in the past. Now we do have cost limiters, or more precisely, token limiters. So I'm very scared, because I have heard just today that there are some people who have like unlimited budget on tokens. I am not like one of those, and I still spend probably too much. But it's very similar to what you would expect. So in 6 hours, you cannot spend more than X tokens. If you are spending already more, just say politely, sorry, I cannot proceed. That's it, really. And it's just some safeguard, against being run all the time. Or, for example, we have the automation or the connection to our agent is that it is being asked by Slack. So if, for example, in the response, it would again call itself. There are some protections for it, of course, now, but it could do some cycling over there. So this is just a protection against this. By the way, fun thing is that by humans, it was like never used, and I think that those rate limits are like pretty low. MCP servers, I think, should be treated in the same way as you treat your developer tooling, mostly. Or, I mean, in our case, this is some, let's say, auxiliary helper tool for the ops, right? We are not using it directly from a production. So we don't have any automation right now that there would be an alert, it would instantly like try to investigate. So I, as an ops team person, I'm going to Slack and asking an agent for some advice. That's what I do. I mean, given this workflow, we treat it the very same as we, for example, treat Sentry, which is for the developer as some auxiliary tools. If it is down, it is down. It's like a shame, but it doesn't influence the productional workloads at all. I think that it's very same with MCP servers. So the MCP infrastructure, from like my perspective, should be considered as your logging infrastructure, observability infrastructure, anything in this direction. Something that is important, but auxiliary, not the core part of the product. Microservices connection. Oh, this is very, very interesting again. So I come currently from a company that has some combination of a large monolith that is being strangled, each year by year, and we have like 160 microservices, and some of those are based on the monolith actually, so it's some kind of a hybrid setup. Actually, the developers are having problems with these definitions because some services are long abandoned, you know the drill, right? So we don't even have such a thing as having a, let's say, valid README for the services, that I would go to each service and there would be written, okay, this service that does X, and it has these consumers, it is consuming from these Kafka topics, something like this. We don't have a thing. In fact, I can remember that we were in an incident and the managers were asking Claude, hey, can you sum up what the thing does? Because the name of the service was misleading at this particular, and the team, for some reason used some historical surveys, something like this. If we would have it, it would be much more effective, because what I haven't showed you and what does not work for us, I need to be again clear on this one, is what impact does this problem have? But originally we were thinking, hey, I will just ask agent, hey, what impact does it have? Does it matter that this service is down or no influence at all? And we don't have it because we are missing exactly this. We are missing the READMEs, Claude MDs, agent MDs, how do you call it, for each service. So the agent would be able to go and investigate what is the connection and give you some hints, some clues, like holistically. Now, when the database is down, you can, because we have some hierarchy that we run in some self-contained units, you can understand which customers are affected, in which data center, which region on the globe, etc. But nothing more than this. If the service is just cleaning up the recycle bin in our application, or if it is serving the homepage, I really don't know. Sorry, I need to stop. Thank you very much.